Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Change Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Kris Ashley. I explore the intersection between personal development, spirituality, and science. I'm really excited to have my guest today because we're going to talk about past life regression and all sorts of stuff that I just totally geek out about. But first, a couple quick announcements. Check out the links in the show notes. You can buy my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. It's in paperback, ebook, audiobook. It was endorsed by 3 experts from The Secret, Anita Moorjani, John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Also, this podcast is part of a podcast network that's owned by the Los Angeles Tribune. So we've got a lot of really cool stuff going on in the personal development realm. So keep an eye on us, keep up with what we're doing. All the links for my free workshops, my seminars, events, coaching are in the show notes. Hi, I'm Kris. When I was younger, I went through trauma that caused me to feel broken and lost. But my life changed after I had a spiritual awakening. Since then, I've dedicated my life to studying and learning from masters all around the world that have helped me to create a life of fulfillment and abundance beyond my wildest dreams. Now I'm dedicated to sharing everything I've learned so that you don't have to suffer for decades like I did. I've seen people's lives completely transformed, and I share it all right here. So today I have with me Dawn Grace Kelly, all the way from New Zealand, I believe, which is exciting. So Dawn Grace Kelly is an internationally renowned past life regression therapy expert, author and go-to spiritual healer and energy intuitive based in the South Island of New Zealand. Dawn is the founder of lightschool.nz, a school for professional healers to learn ancient esoteric healing techniques grounded in modern psychology and quantum science. For the past 30 years, Dawn has been in private practice as a spiritual guide and healer. Her work includes past life regression, inner child work, counseling, ET experiencer regression, spirit releasement therapy, spiritual healing, and tarot. Dawn is an engaging speaker with decades of experience in the metaphysical field. She is passionate about healing and supporting lightworkers to be fully empowered. Wow, that is a lot on your resume. Welcome, Dawn. I'm glad you're here.
Oh, so good to be here, Kris. Thank you so much for having me.
And I should have asked you this before we pressed record, but do you go by Dawn Grace or Dawn?
I like both, but Dawn's fine, just to keep it simple for you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, always a good thing to check. Amazing. So much to cover there. I like to start all my episodes the same way, and that is to ask what people's origin stories are, because it's so fascinating to me what led people on this spiritual journey. And usually there's something that happened in their life that kind of triggered a change in trajectory. So if you wouldn't mind sharing what got you started in this spiritual journey.
Yeah, thank you, Kris. Yeah, when I think about that question, it always makes me think, where were those origins? And they're not from this lifetime, but I totally understand the question, and I'll stick with this lifetime because we do bring so much through from other realms and other times. So yeah, it began way back, but in current lifetime, where would it have begun? My mum is a professional astrologer. She was studying astrology when I was a child. She was a metaphysical student. So those kind of teachings have always been around me. So I guess I could say in current time, I was looking for a mother that could help hold the energy for what I was bringing through. In my teens, I was studying numerology and astrology. And as I moved into my later teens, starting to think about what I wanted to do, I always had wanted to be a natural healer. It was just kind of in my bones, I guess. It was a natural passion and interest. So I thought I wanted to be a naturopath, and I studied naturopathy. I was lured by the glamour of becoming a flight attendant. So that kind of took me off that. I wanted to go and explore that kind of world for a little while before I got back to my studies. As it turns out, that was excellent training for a lot of the things that I do now. But while I was working through that career in my 20s, I was continuing my studies, and it was starting to get a little more spiritual. And I guess I think what was probably pivotal is when my older brother, maybe 3 years older than me, he died of an autoimmune condition. And when I was going through that grieving process, he came to me in spirit, and that was my first experience, my first conscious experience of having spirit close. My mother had been doing automatic writing. That was something I knew about. I was kind of connected with my guides, but via Jamie, who passed over, I began automatic writing for the first time, which kind of blew my mind. And that just opened a whole nother world of connection to spirit. And my studies started to get a little more spiritual. In fact, when I was learning massage, I was still a flight attendant. I was studying massage. And my massage therapist was doing a massage on me and took his hands off me doing something else. And it was the strongest, most evocative, special feeling at that time. And I was so excited to learn that he was working guided with spirit through his hands. The feeling was incredible. And that led me to go on and learn spiritual healing. And I guess that's where it really began for me. I wanted to know everything about working guided with spirit, which led me into training with that. And soon after that, I was led into a past life regression of my own, a field I've been fascinated with and read about for years. Was excited to find a past life regressionist in Perth in Australia, where I was living at the time. And that opened another doorway. And I started to move away from naturopathy and wanted to do more of that kind of work. And in my late 20s, I left flying and began my practice.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing. That's amazing that your mom was into all of this. Like you're so lucky.
Yeah, I think I'm blessed as well.
Yeah, but of course we pick our parents that we're going to be born to, right? So it's not even luck. You chose that for sure. Mm. So I'm curious. You were talking about automatic writing, and for listeners who might not know what that is, can you explain about what that is and how you were able to connect with your brother through that?
Yeah, sure. So automatic writing is when you move some of your consciousness away so you can channel a higher energy. A more evolved being can come through and write through you. So it's a form of channeling, I guess. And how to do it? Well, yeah, there's lots to know about how to do that. But yeah, it's quite a beautiful experience and kind of natural for someone who's doing spiritual healing and practiced with being able to move some of their consciousness to one side and allow this higher energy to come through the hands as healing or through the pen as words. So that's essentially what it is, yes.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. And when you were connecting with your brother, was it almost like he was writing through you? Is that how
it was totally like he was writing through me. And when I first began, it was very slow, very awkward while my hand was moving. But as you evolve with that work, it starts to become more of your own muscular, more of your own muscles working as you're getting the words coming through. So I moved from just letting my hand be moved by spirit, which is kind of slow, to being able to just access that and write. Yeah.
That's so special. That's like, what a special connection that you were able to have. And
yeah, so blessed. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, what is that book? Oh, you've probably read it. The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. I always think about that book.
That's such a cool book, Kris, isn't it?
It was like the most beautiful book I've ever read. The way that he describes the afterlife. For listeners that don't know, it's the author's brother also passed, and he connected with her, and he was explaining and just describing what he was seeing as he went through these different stages, and it was just so beautiful.
Yeah, so fascinating. It really is. And I'm just I'm writing a manual at the moment for life between life work for a new course that I'm offering shortly, and it's taking me right into that field. I'm glad you mentioned it, because that'd be a really cool book to revisit.
Yeah, and to just reference. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so talk to me about life between life work. And I know that you've studied QHHT as well, even though most of your modality is what is it? I wrote down Reverend Neville Noel's technique now. And I'm going to ask about all of that, but I'm such a Dolores Cannon fan. Between Death and Life is Between Death and Life is my favorite by her. I love it. Was life-changing. I love hearing about all that. So please talk to me about this manual you're writing. Talk to me about your work in that space.
Yeah. And I just love the synchronicities. We're obviously so meant to be together today. Well, we're together, so obviously we're meant to be. But there's another point. That's one book of hers that I haven't read, and I only discovered that book 2 days ago.
Wow.
So
that gave me goosebumps. That's crazy.
I know, right? And it's a book that I want to get my hands on. I'm keen to look at it. Dolores's work is awesome. She's a great pioneer, one of the pioneers in this field. And yes, I've had the privilege of training with her before she passed into spirit. And I do use some of her techniques in my work as an adjunct for my advanced students. But the foundation training that I offer in Past Life Regression, I just love this technique that I've adapted a little from Reverend Neville Rowe, who's also in spirit, that I would never do it any differently. I kind of add things here and there. Life between life work, so fascinating. And it's a field that I have explored with clients numerous times, but I've never taught that. I had always thought it's more of a curiosity and an interest for people. And I know those realms so well that I haven't really seen it as so therapeutic. Yet having revisited that with some clients this year, it's like this is actually quite therapeutic in a whole different way. So I'm now moving on to offer that for my advanced students who've got really solid foundations in hypnotherapy or past life regression to just go a little bit deeper into these realms where, of course, we can learn all sorts of stuff about why we've chosen the lives we've chosen, why our relationships are the way they are, meet with our wiser, more evolved spiritual beings, have our questions answered, do physical healing work, even exploring in the spirit realms. So I'm excited about that, as well as doing womb work, which is something I've done but plenty in the past. It's a nice adjunct with the life between life work, exploring coming into the body and what's happening while you're in the womb, etc. So it's all fascinating, and anything in that spiritual realm is too interesting not to be doing more with.
It's so fascinating. And now that I've been into all of this for 2 decades now, but I can't imagine why so many people just get so absorbed in the petty dramas of this earthly 3D experience when there's so much more that we could be talking about, like all of this. But you said womb work, which is just like made me perk my ears up because I'm 7 months pregnant right now. So talk to me a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, sure. So, well, obviously, we've got experiences in other realms, in other lives, other planets, in the womb, in current life. We've got experiences everywhere, and they're all places that we might go when we're looking for the root of some of the stuff you were just talking about, all the day-to-day stuff that we, carry on about, things that are, when we go deeper with some of that stuff, instead of just the chatter and the story of it, when we go deeper into where the roots of these feelings are, or the roots of these issues, we can find ourselves in any of those places, and sometimes it is in the womb. And so I work in that place when we arrive in that place, when that's where we go during subconscious mind work. And it's a place where, just like every other place, where stuff is happening around us with other people around us, and we're responding and having our own personal experience of that, which may result in some level of trauma. And when we're dealing with 3D earth life, it's not unusual to have some issues around maybe arguments or guilt or concerns from the mother. They will come through to us, and we will perceive them. No pressure, but the deal is, Kris, isn't it? I mean, we do these imperfect lives with our egos, and we don't do perfect. we can't be that. We can do our best to be the ultimate healthy mother psychologically and physically through our pregnancy, but it's not realistic to be perfect through all of that, because there is, of course, there's lessons that this little person is bringing you, and there's lessons this little person is needing to experience from choosing you. So it's all okay on a meta level, I guess, on a higher level. Yet on the human side of things, sometimes there's work we need to do with that. And if your higher self is guiding you back to the womb, we can find things like, sensitive, aware souls giving energy to their mother to help her weakness because she's not able to help herself, which is very noble of a little spirit, yet it's compromising them. So we'll do some work around that to regain that energy, or maybe the spirits come out of that little body in the womb. Well, they're in and out anyway until they're solid in the womb later in the pregnancy. But maybe that spirit has decided to exit the body because of trauma that's happening through the pregnancy. It's just way too much. And then we'd be doing some kind of soul retrieval work and some healing work around validating and empathizing that, like what I'd call inner child work. So it can lead us in kind of different directions. Yeah, all sorts of things can happen in that place. Yeah.
It's really interesting. It's funny that you say no one's perfect. I was literally just watching a Dolores clip before this, and someone was like, well, when does the reincarnation cycle end? And she was like, when you're perfect. And if you're here, you're not perfect, And I like that.
It's a nice, simple answer from Dolores. I can imagine her saying that.
Yeah.
And yet we do, our higher self, the bigger, more spiritual us that doesn't all fit in the Kris package. Some of that fits in there, but the bigger totality of us is looking for all of these experiences so we can level up into the perfection that we are. And by ourselves seeking to put ourselves onto this planet in particular, because it is known by spiritual teachers as a training planet, because there's so many different levels of experience here. It's not all like with like. And so the varying levels of evolvement make for quite a few challenges. And via those challenges, we can know ourselves more if we're ready for that. And of course, being a past life regressionist, one thing that I do, I know from experience that we do the same lifetime a ridiculous amount of times, not just 2 or 3 times. We do the same lifetime in a different body, maybe a different country. We do the same thing over and over because our egos are so slow to learn. There's this, the ego wants to anchor us here and keep us away from the unknown. That's part of the game. So we're at a time in history now, more so than ever before, where our history's coming forward, our trauma from current time and past lives are coming forward, so we can start to wrap up this cycle of karma being for every action there's a reaction. Yeah, as we wrap that up, we can come more into who we really are, which gets us closer to this perfection that you heard from Dolores earlier, gets us closer to being more evolved and evolving the planet, so it becomes a different kind of place. I don't know when that happens, but not a place where karma is just going over and over. The more we all grow, the more we all wrap up the karma, then we can be in a more evolved state on this planet or somewhere else. I don't even know if I answered your question. I might have got a bit off track there.
I don't even remember what my question was, but I love talking about all of this. And actually, I was going to ask you, do you think the souls stay, because we were talking about the womb, do you think the souls stay in the baby's body, or do they hang around the parents, or do they come and go? Because I know Dolores is like, they can come and go as long as they're there before the first breath. And you kind of answered that.
Yeah, but that's true. That's what I understand too, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like, sometimes I'll ask questions that I've heard answers to just so listeners can hear this stuff, right? Because it's so fascinating, and there's so much I want to touch on. Everything really does happen for a reason, and choices are made, and sometimes the baby just wants to experience life in the womb, right? Like I I just had a close friend who had to make a really difficult decision to abort a pregnancy due to like health issues. And she was having a hard time, and I was telling her, you know, that baby can come back anytime you want it to, right? Like a lot of times when people miscarry or have abortions, that soul will re-enter again, right? When they're ready.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that's so interesting.
Yeah.
But just before I do, I just want to come back to what you were saying about the soul coming in and out of the body.
Yeah.
Because an insight just come through when you mentioned that. What came to me? So yeah, definitely the soul's coming in and out of the body through the pregnancy. And being pregnant yourself, you will know that you will know, like, whoa, I'm really connecting here. It's pretty obvious to know when the spirit is there in your quiet moments. So what I wanted to say was the spirit will come in and out. So to get used to the womb, to get used to you, to get used to the energy, and it will come in for particular positive / negative experiences that it needs for its growth. Yeah. So depending on your situations, it might not want to be there for that, or it might want to be there for that, whether it's a good or bad experience, right? But yeah, definitely getting towards the end of the pregnancy, you're getting more and more of the energy coming through. So coming back to terminations, yeah, they're interesting. And you're absolutely right. With terminations, there's a contract that's happening.
Yeah.
It's between these two spirits. And we must remember that every spirit has, or every soul, every spirit has an agenda. That's what they're coming here for. And that agenda might include, I need to give Kris or whoever we're involved. Oh, I won't make it personal. we need to give Susan. We need to give Susan an experience of deep grief, because that's what's going to get her closer to loving herself. We might want to give Susan the experience of so much love by me being in here. Numerous different reasons it could be. I want to give her that because of something we've done before. This is a karmic relationship. It's not a new relationship. So that they're part of the same soul team, soul group. I want to give her this. I'm going to stick around for 8 weeks so she can get that. I'm going to get to experience a whole list of things. We could brainstorm out all the different things that soul gets to experience. So that's kind of one scenario. All sorts of different lessons can come for both sides. So that's really helpful when we're starting to facilitate Susan to process her pain around all of that. And yes, you're absolutely right. Of course, that spirit will come back if that's what's meant to be. And that's quite common for it to come back when the timing's right. And sometimes it's a case of, oh, I thought she was ready, but I can see a random wild cards come in here and she's not ready. And maybe that brings grief to the spirit as well, that they need to process with their spirit team. That's part of their learning as well. And then they set the time up differently. So yes, it's all as it's meant to be. And of course, we get into more harm for Susan around all of that if she's not processing her guilt. So she's got an opportunity to go deeper with that. It might bring up stuff from her childhood that needs healing, or from past life that needs healing, etc. And then the little soul's done a major big job by taking her back and getting her more ready, better ready, there's some bad English, for when it's time to bring that energy, when the timing's right for them to be together.
Yeah, and I love, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm very familiar with miscarriage because I did have 3 miscarriages in a short period of time before I held a pregnancy with my partner and I's only son, who's 17 now. So I went through this process of a lot of miscarriages, no terminations. But what I saw through that, so yeah, pivoting slightly into miscarriage, but what I saw from that, obviously on the 3rd one, I was like, we got to get to the roots of this, because this is too much. This is a lot to go through, which did take me into past life work, which sorted out the issue. I was able to go on and hold the pregnancy after that. But I knew from my inner connections that Rain, my son's name's Rain, that Rain was around through two of those. And my sense is that the first one was another energy that I needed to sort some stuff out with. So it can really vary. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for explaining all that. It's so fascinating. And I think it's also important for people to know that, there's nothing but forgiveness and love from that soul to you, right? There's no resentment, there's no anger. And this might be a lesson that you needed to go through, right?
Yeah.
This was in your
Yeah,
contract.
absolutely. And that makes me want to talk about if it's making me think about that spirit staying close to you because you haven't resolved this, and it's the spirit's love and care and concern for you can even have them maybe earthbound, where they're not able to go and heal and evolve and do the next thing until you've made peace with this. So then that energetic tie so you can both heal. Does that make sense to you?
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And I've heard the same thing about people who pass over. When you grieve so hard for someone and you can't let it go, and you're just in that place of despair, you're actually doing that soul a disservice, right? Because you're keeping them earthbound. Same kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've got some good knowledge about all of this, Kris. Yeah, definitely. And that's another field I do work with. I do spirit releasement therapy, and it's something we see often.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not unusual to do a therapeutic session with your loved one in spirit when you feel ready. I mean, obviously, your child or your partner, that's not going to be easy to let go of. There's a process here.
Yeah.
And they will stay close to earth to support you with that process. And if you're getting some strong, aware support around this, it's not so difficult to feel when the time's right to do another level of this, which is letting them go. So it's not so much the grief that holds them. Yeah, and let's just talk about that for a moment, because grief is a feeling. If you're with that feeling, that energy's moving through your body. But if you're with the thoughts, and sometimes the intense thoughts might take us away from the feeling, and we think we're grieving, but we're not feeling anything. We're getting into story about how bad this all is. That's a different, that will hold them more. But the actual grieving itself is a way to really evolve this. And so when I think about some of the ancient cultures, the Maori here in New Zealand, for instance, they wail in that time. They go through a few days of very loud, deep grieving, which means it processes, it's very intense, but it means it processes much more quickly because, they're more connected to, a higher awareness about that. We tend to, in the Western world, we have sort of a background of hold the feelings in generally, although with grief, sometimes they're coming out. But if you can imagine, screaming and howling for hours and days, and then, 3 days in, you're absolutely spent and so much has come through, it makes it easier to go forward, even though it's particularly painful at the time. I mean, that's a good example of processing a lot of grief without getting into the story of it all and having it stuck. But yes, we can totally hold on to them. And so then I think about when we keep the room the same and the clothes in the wardrobe. And I think a lot of us would probably need to do that to help our process for a while, but it does keep them close. And thoughts of, you've gone before your time, you shouldn't have died so young, and these ego-based fear thoughts, because of course we die at the perfect time, always. There's no such thing. But those kind of thoughts, I wish you were here, I wish you hadn't died, they're like spells to keep this energy close. And then, at some point it's really helpful to do a very loving, beautiful, energetic disconnection where you don't lose your love, but you evolve it to let this spirit go forward into a higher realm to do their healing work. Yeah.
That completely all makes sense. And I love the idea of the wailing and the not getting into the story. I mean, it's as simple as feel your emotions so that you can let them go, right? And that, I talk so much on my show and in my book about how holding on to repressed emotions can cause pain and illness and all sorts of things. So everything you said completely makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I'm totally on that page. I've written about very similar things in my book because, like you, Kris, I'm so passionate about that. And yeah, I just want to say to you, it's as simple as feeling your feelings. It is so simple, and it's so complex as well because of our trauma. In and of itself, it's simple. I totally agree with you. It's stop the thoughts. We've got to constantly train ourselves. Oh, here comes some sadness. Oh, that must be about my father when I was younger, da, 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 da. And then we move away from the feeling. We've got to train ourselves to come back because, as I'm sure you're well aware, the reason we don't stay with our feelings is because we haven't been taught how to be with emotions and how to be with such big emotions. We've generally been shut down for those emotions or shown that it isn't safe. There was a whole generation of, I'll give you something to cry about. What are you crying about? We're showing that it's not right. So if we go into our feelings, we've got a program running in the background that says that's not safe, don't do it. So learning about emotions becomes, which is why I wrote the book that I did, and probably one of the reasons you wrote your book as well, because we want to educate people about how to be with these emotions and train you in things that children are now being trained in, are parented into, and it becomes second nature. I mean, I've got a teenager that's renowned for being emotionally intelligent, and really every child needs to be emotionally intelligent. Yeah, but to have a teenager or a young child that says, I'm feeling really angry, please don't talk to me now, I need to go and hit my pillow and move this out. I mean, that's where we're heading. And then it becomes not so difficult to spend a few days in such intense pain to shift it. Yeah,
thanks for bringing that up, because that's such an important point, that these things are easy in theory. It's simple in theory, but it's difficult in the moment. Awesome. So I mean, I would love to talk a little bit more about that space between death and life. And like you said, I geek out on this stuff. I love talking about it. But I know that not everyone else geeks out about it and reads all these books on it. So, I guess we could start with, what has, from your regressions that you've done, what happens when we die? What is that? Where do people go? What's that journey? What's that process like?
Yeah. So bear in mind here that my expertise is in past life regression, and obviously I have a lot of knowledge about the between life realms, but it hasn't been a focus of my work to do that work. So having a body of work, I wouldn't call it. I'd want hundreds and hundreds of that of those cases to be able to really speak to that. Yet what I've noticed I have done enough of it to be able to answer your question and my own personal journeys here. So when we die, I mean, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware of near-death experiences, and there's some awesome books. Raymond Moody back in the 70s wrote the first book about near-death experiences, and we've got a lot of knowledge from case studies from leaders in the field that have done that work. So it's pretty classic for there to be some kind of tunnel with light towards the end, some kind of portal that we're moving through. Our consciousness from Earth, so the ego personality that's unique to that body has its own program of what's going to happen. So if you've got a lot of maybe Christianity, for example, something really common, it will be presented to you in that way to fit with your model. So that can bring a particular quality to what you're seeing and experiencing, as can every belief, as can no beliefs. So what's classic is some kind of portal or tunnel into light, guides that will take you there. And we may be aware of those or we may not be, depending on our level of reality. So we perceive according to what we know. So the more we know, the better. And that is something I'm passionate about, is raising awareness on this sort of thing so it's smoother. Because it can be quite scary if you don't know some of this stuff. You don't know what to expect. Sometimes we might we've got to move through the fourth dimensional realm, so a little bit of knowledge about dimensions is helpful too. And the fourth dimension, well, that's another field we can go down, but the fourth dimension is closer to Earth. And we're, for simplicity's sake, because there's dimensions within dimensions too, we're moving towards the light, which is more fifth dimensional. So we might be bypassing all sorts of kind of more dense stuff and some more interesting stuff. It's where the fairies and divas and some of the native people hang out. So there's all sorts going on in that dimension as we move forward. So we may be aware of that, we may not be, depending on our awareness. Guides to meet us that we're familiar with. Family and pets to meet us that we're familiar with, i.e. souls that we're familiar with. And they might present in the form of the animal that you had. They might present in ways that you remember from your earth life, again, depending on your level of awareness. It's going to be working for you. So not unusual for there to be dad and that cat that you had, and or more evolved versions of that if your consciousness is at that place. We may, once again, this is all really dependent on our level of awareness, because it really varies. So we may go to what we might think of as a hospital, a healing kind of place, and that's somewhere we're likely to go if the death was sudden, or after a long illness where we're needing to integrate and process that. So that's a common place to be, and somewhere that I've seen numerous people, and more so because I do therapeutic work. So I tend to be targeting things that need to be healed. So it would be different if we're doing more exploratory work, but in the therapeutic field with the sort of things that I'm dealing with, we often find ourselves in hospital, or if I'm working with people who have suicided, that they're often in a place like that, where once we've got them to a place where they know they can go to the light, there's another interesting topic, because they often stay earthbound with the shame that they're feeling. It actually doesn't heal a lot until you are open to go with your guides or into the light. So some kind of hospital place or a resting recovery place where you're shown, where you can just land and realize what's happened, do some healing work, do your life review. That may happen there, or it may happen elsewhere. Where you can start, when you're ready, exploring outside of that place, the beautiful gardens, etc., until you're in a place where you can go further into the fifth dimension, like slightly up. If your vibration's coming up, then you can go forward and maybe do all sorts of interesting things, connecting with other family, maybe visiting the libraries and the halls of learning and hanging out, whatever your agenda is. And from there, when you're feeling ready, or when you're feeling drawn, you'll be wanting to plan another incarnation on Earth or elsewhere, or you might be wanting to rest for longer. So this is up to our higher self's agenda, and you'll feel that draw and that pull. So that's the kind of thing that happens. Isn't it interesting?
It's so fascinating. I'm grateful to you that even though that wasn't your area of expertise, you went there for us, because I think it's so important to demystify death for people, because it's like walking through a doorway. And from all these, I've gone down so many rabbit holes with NDEs. From everything I've read and watched, it's almost like this life is the dream, and you wake up there and you're like, oh wow, I was dreaming, but it felt so real, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so like that, Kris, and I agree with you. It's so exciting to be with someone who's on the same page, because demystifying death, I believe, is everything, and that's probably one of my underlying passions and why I'm involved in the things I am, because my raising consciousness is one of the things you'll notice when you go to my homepage. That is the mission. And the raising consciousness is about opening to the bigger reality, like you say. And when we demystify death, it changes life completely. We do so much from an ego place to stop death. We get drugged. The medical system is taught to make us stay alive as long as possible, no matter what, because we don't want death. And we do hear people say he died before his time, he died too young, this is not fair, etc., because death is like the wrong thing, the bad thing. And it is exactly like what you're saying. And if you've done any plant medicine journeys or shamanic journeying work, all of these things that can take you into other realms, you start to come away from a belief in this or a disbelief in this into a knowing in your body once you've experienced that this is the game, exactly like what you say. And that changes how you live. And if everybody knew that death is the coming home, we would live in a different way. We'd have a different place here.
Yeah. And that it's, as you were talking, I was thinking also like that it's not painful. Like Dolores even says, you know, if there's like a traumatic death, like oftentimes the soul just exits the body, and
Absolutely.
the body is like, I always think of like the Salem witch trials, like those women weren't feeling those flames. Their souls were like, we're just going to watch this from over here. And the body was wailing and reacting and moving, but the souls weren't feeling that.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've got decades in this field. I've got a ridiculous amount of history on that being actually the case, including being burnt myself. I notice feelings in my body when you mention that. And yes, I remember feeling the heat and the flames on my legs, and then I was out of my body. That was enough. I don't want any more of those flames. So before you're falling off the mountain, you've jumped off the mountain to kill yourself, you leave way before you hit the ground. Our souls are smart, so there isn't any pain unless you've contracted to have pain which is usually before a dying experience. It's not the death itself. You're contracted to lie around for a year feeling horrible before you die, because that becomes part of your learning and part of what you're teaching all the people around you as well. But what comes to mind when you're talking about that is the very first past life regression I experienced when I was younger. And I was a young boy, and my father had come home to the hut that we were all living in, and he was torching the house. He couldn't find food, and in his desperation, he decided to end it all for all of us.
Wow.
So that's kind of dramatic, and my regressionist was interested in exploring that. I was busy leaving my body, and as I was leaving my body, and she's saying, what happens next with the fire? And she said to me, this is going to be very painful and traumatic for you, which is a thing you don't say as a regressionist. But
yeah,
that's just an interesting training point that I still use. But as she's saying all of this and trying to get more information about that, I'm like, whoa, oh my God, this is amazing. And she's like, what's happened to your mother and your brother? I'm like, I don't care about that. This just feels so good. And I'm just this child being free, and suddenly that life doesn't matter anymore. And that's definitely when I went from a belief in past lives and life after death to the knowing. It was such a full body experience. But I left way before that fire, way before it came anywhere near me. So I have no concerns about that for anybody.
Yeah.
Yet if we don't know that, the thoughts of what that all must feel like is really horrible for us, for our loved ones. But when you journey in and you connect with them and you start to learn this, it brings so much relief to know that they were okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they might be walking around dazed in the spirit world. What the hell happened? And am I really dead? With a sudden shocking death. And that needs some facilitation. They've got light beings around them. But if they're not aware of them, or they have no concept of that, they might not see them. So they could be stuck in that for a while. And that's where some of us healers in spirit and earth side can support those beings. So yeah.
But everyone eventually moves back on, right? Like And I like that you were talking about the healing space, which you call the hospital. And it's so funny you haven't read Between Death and Life, because Dolores goes into all of this in such deep uh, detail. But there's the healing space. There's a tapestry room where there's all these tapestries of all the lives woven together. There's the library,
Yeah.
like you said. There's a lot to do. So I've also heard, I don't know if it was from Dolores, I think it was from someone else, that when you actually go through the light, it serves a function. It severs that silver cord that tethers you to your physical body. So NDEs will go towards the light, but they don't cross through. But it's like this powerful energy. Is that true? Have
Yeah.
you heard about that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I haven't experienced my own personal experience of that. But as you're talking, I get images of that, and I can see the gradual, it's a gradual breaking away. Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I love talking about this stuff. So I want to bring it back to something, and I cannot believe it's almost been an hour. I'm definitely going to need to come back on the show because we haven't even talked about past lives yet, and that's
I
what you
know.
expertise in. But I wanted to ask a question because you were talking about the wheel of karma earlier, and I watch a lot of Julia Cannon and Kai Wittenberg's lives they do every week, and that's Dolores' daughter, for those who don't know her. And they talk a lot about how karma is over, like accumulating karma is over. And I haven't been able to wrap my head around that one. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah,
And if
yeah,
you
yeah.
agree, tell me, explain it.
Yeah. So it's a good question, and I agree with you. Karma is over, and what Dolores was saying before she died is that it's time to wrap up the karma. Is karma over? No, it's not. That's just not realistic. Are we at a time where that can wrap up for a lot of us with awareness? Yes, definitely. That part of it's true. Karma can't wrap up if you're still creating situations where you're going to need to resolve. Yeah. So, if you're carrying, I don't know, what's a good example? You're hating on your neighbor, like fully hating on your neighbor. You're putting some of your energy towards them.
Yeah.
And if you don't pull that energy out, it's not going to disappear. That's energy. So that and if you're constantly thinking about how frustrating they are and they're driving you crazy, and that's all those thoughts are energy. So you're hooking an energy line into this person with some of your bad vibes, I guess, to keep it simple. Some of your bad vibes are going over them. That creates karma. That has to have a reaction, and maybe it's in current time and maybe another time. But does karma stop for everybody? That doesn't seem realistic to me at all. Are we in a time where we can do more fast tracking with this because our collective consciousness is wanting to complete that cycle? Yes, I believe that. And I believe there will be a time when we've collectively evolved from that. But I don't believe that some of us can do the work for everybody. I believe that everybody needs to do this. So that's something I'd have to sit with a bit more, but that's what I want to say about it, and that's how I've thought about it as this information's been coming through from various people. Karma doesn't just end. It's not just like some intelligence in the sky saying, that's it, that's done, we're moving on from that. We are all God. We're all part of this. So we've all got to be on the same page for a collective shift to happen. And I believe the conditions are more powerful than they've ever been in history for us to move that way.
That makes sense. And that really resonates with me. And it sounds like the way to release karma is through forgiveness.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there's an interesting topic, Kris, because it's something else that I'm passionate about. It's bottom line healing for any psychological or physical healing work that we're doing. No matter what modality or person we're drawn to, if we don't forgive, which is a spiritual practice, it's not an intellectual practice, if we don't forgive, we're putting lines of our spirit, our power, our soul, energy ties again, like I was talking about the hating on the neighbor, we're putting energy back in time to a younger part of ourselves or another person, and we're holding energy. Some of our spirit is there. So we can't heal if we're not all in present time to do that. A lack of forgiveness means resentment, and that's a discordant energy for our heart center. So around our chest area in our body, there'll be discordancy that if you're an energy healer, you might feel that, but it's blocking the flow of life force into this area of your body. So this is where some chakra knowledge is interesting. And that restricts the amount of life force that is looking after your lungs and your chest and your heart. So it's no surprise that heart attacks are still the #1 killer in the world when people haven't forgiven, because the heart's just not receiving the optimal energy. So that could be around resentment, self-love, and that kind of grab bag of stuff can have you needing to come back and have another go at all of this. So yeah, forgiveness is a bottom line healing, but you need to learn a little bit about that, because we've got to bust some myths about forgiveness as well. It's another topic we could talk about.
Yeah, and that makes sense a lot with the energetic cords and how it ties into spare energy that you have to heal your body and to do the things that your body needs to do. Oh my gosh, pregnancy brain. It just totally went out of my mind what I was going to say. Oh,
Well,
just
that's okay.
just that that's been happening more and more recently. Just that, I feel like also the term karma can be really misunderstood by people. Like, it doesn't mean that you deserve to have your legs broken in this lifetime. It means that there's a balancing out, right? That there's a lesson that needs to learn, that there's something that needs to be resolved with that person. So maybe in your next lifetime, you and that same person are put in a situation where you have the opportunity to try again, right? Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And we see that heaps. I mean, we incarnate with people from our souls from a soul group repetitively. So we're with the same players quite often. And yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. We need to balance this stuff out. I mean, if you've killed somebody in another life, or somebody's killed you, I mean, it's just a classic example of that's going to create some karma. If that's the way that you died, you're going to have some feelings towards this person, and they're going to have feelings towards you. So that they might be somebody that's all over you in this lifetime trying to make up for it, and you're just like, resisting them because you don't know why you've got an aversion. So past life regression can be helpful with that. But yeah, I mean, anything that you're putting out karma is any action has a reaction. And maybe it's that day, maybe the next day, maybe 10 years' time, maybe another lifetime. That pendulum just keeps swinging, and we're looking for balance. So absolutely.
Yeah. How are you doing? How are you doing for time?
I'm good for time if you want to go a little bit more.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I could talk to you forever.
I've got another 15 minutes.
Another 15 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I've heard that having kids creates karma in your life. And because of that, so I was on a 7-year journey to get pregnant, and actually a QHHT session helped figure out why a little bit. But I think also that idea that having kids creates karma, and I'm here as a volunteer, and I was like, ooh, is that really what's right for me in this lifetime? And I really went back and forth about whether I even wanted to have kids because of that. And I'm curious what your thoughts on that are, and if you agree, maybe explain to me a little bit why.
Oh, okay. Let's just see what comes through about that. That's not a question I've ever been asked before, but it's interesting. Having kids creates karma. Well, that's an interesting message to be putting out there.
Yeah.
we need to extrapolate on that a little bit. We have children because we're drawn to have children for numerous reasons. I mean, just our humanity usually draws us that way. Obviously, not all women are having children because they've got some history where they're not needing to do that in this lifetime. They've got some past lives where they've done that. maybe it's gone all bad and they're too scared to do it again, or maybe they've done so much of it that it's just not necessary, etc. So we've all got a path that we've chosen that includes children or doesn't include children. I mean, an astrological chart will show you that plan.
Really?
So that's an easy thing. Well, that's an easy thing for my mum to pick up on, being a professional astrologer. It's part of the plan with what you're doing here. Creating karma, I just think that's quite a bizarre thing to say, really. Could it create karma? Yes, it could. But that's because that's what you're needing to go through. You don't have a child to create karma. You have a child because you've got a contract together. You've got a little light worker that needs to be born on the planet. And you're like, yeah, well, I haven't had children for a while. I haven't experienced that. Or, yeah, I love what you did for me once upon a time, so I'll be the mother for you. It's helping karma. Could it create more karma if you have I mean, you're incarnating in soul groups anyway, so you're probably going to be doing more stuff somewhere together. But it could create some kind of karma because of your ties together and any issues that you have together. But that makes sense to me because we're incarnating in the same families anyway. But if you're on some mission to end karma, then I'd be curious as to why you're incarnating on Earth. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's I totally understand. I didn't mean to put you on the spot at all. That was another.
Oh, I don't feel on the spot. No, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is, and that's another one I heard from. I don't think it was Dolores. I think it was Julia and Kaya that like created some fear for me. Like I said, like honestly about having children. So, and it's never really made sense in my head. So I appreciate your kind of processing it out loud with me too.
Yeah. And some of the things that come through if there's fear coming to you, it gives you information. It gives you intuitive information that's worth following. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I think that's quite a strange statement that doesn't make sense to me.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel better. So thanks. Okay, should we pivot and actually talk about past life regression?
Yeah, sure. What would you like to know about it?
We've got 10 minutes left. And there's so much to touch on. And I guess you can start really simple for people who, haven't read up on all this. Like I guess the idea is that things that happen in past lives affect our lives today, right? Or they can affect our lives today.
Okay, so what So what I think is an important thing to know about this, before the concept of reincarnation and past lives, thanks for your patience with all of this. I've got a new haircut that's dropping in my face.
It's fabulous. Don't even.
So away from a talk about reincarnation, presuming that makes sense to you, what not everybody knows, what again, some funny bad English. When we die, just before we die, as any good regressionist knows, that the thoughts and feelings that are happening in those final moments are going with you. They're heading out with you. You don't just lose those. So any fear-based thoughts or feelings at that time, just to keep the whole thoughts, feelings thing simple, love thoughts, fear thoughts, they're going with you, and that's going with you into another time because there's no resolution if you're holding those. In a therapeutic session, this is. So as regressionists, we look for that information and then we do some psycho-spiritual work with that after the dying, because this is what is coming into our lifetime with us, that fear of religion, or that despair around having a husband, or that guilt around not leaving the relationship earlier, whatever the feelings are, that's what's getting in the way of our life today. So with what I teach, after we've died, we do a bit of a review of that life, pretty classic with past life regression, but we go on to do some therapeutic work around how that aspect of you, that aspect of your higher self, so just imagine higher self and lots of energy coming down, doing different lives. So that aspect of you, why is it around you today? So I do see it like a spirit attachment, yet it is part of you. And it's around you today. We discover things like, don't go in the water because I don't want the same thing to happen to you. Don't talk about your healing. Don't tell anyone or you'll get burnt and killed and persecuted and have 1,000 people throwing stuff at you. They're trying to protect you in the ways that didn't work for them because they're still with some of the more dense emotions that haven't been processed. It doesn't happen every time, but it happens often enough for it to become a really solid way of working therapeutically for healing work. And once we understand what that character's making you do or not do, how they feel they're trying to help you, then we can send them into the light. I.e., there's a part of us that's more fourth dimensional around us. And the more of those aspects we send home, obviously, the lighter we get and the more we can hold more of our higher self energy, I guess you could say. So thoughts and feelings of a fear-based nature we will carry through and we'll seek resolution with that. And until that's evolved and healed, we tend to be quite repetitive about how we're doing these lives. Yeah. Does that make sense to you?
It totally does. And I'm thinking about my own regressions that I've had that have affected my lifetime today. Also, pain has been a big one, like emotional pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which probably...
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, we find emotional pain through the life. We find it sometimes in the dying experience. The dying experience is often one of the way easier than some of the trauma in the lifetime. But we have physical issues, emotional issues, mental issues, spiritual issues. I mean, that's a brainstorm out that we could do for ages, all the sorts of things that we can work with in other realms. Pretty much it's an endless brainstorm of stuff. And that we will carry through. And sometimes we might still have pain in the hip resulting from the spear that went through us.
Wow.
Because we haven't made peace with what happened there. And we do such powerful, deep therapeutic work around this that, there is no pain there anymore. So seeing a past life doesn't heal it. Experiencing it doesn't heal it. That's just information. It's not until we get into more psycho-spiritual, emotional work that we can start to level that up.
I mean, basically what you're doing is therapy work with people just based off of the trauma they went through in a past life versus this life. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it, Kris. And I think healers need to have, I think all light workers, no matter what their modality, need to know how to work in childhood and in past lives, because there's a root somewhere and you need to know how to get there. So I think it's a must do, because it's coming forward more and more because of the power of the times that we're living in. People are having spontaneous regressions. People who didn't even know about this work are suddenly having experiences and memories because we're at a time where we're wanting to wrap up karma. So it's coming forward for a lot of people. And the more that we can facilitate this and help that, the more we get this collective lifting of consciousness to take us into the kind of places that you've mentioned before, where we are all evolving and moving away from karma.
Yeah, very cool. And I'm just looking at the notes from when we first had our conversation, and I wrote down that you separate out the character versus who they really are, kind of like parts work. And
it's kind of like totally like parts work, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd love if you could just talk a little bit about that, if that's okay.
Yeah, so with my technique, when we've died, we're still in character while we're doing a review and getting any more information that we feel we need. And then we ask the client to imagine that character as separate from them, so they can be their aware adult self, to make it easier to dialogue with this aspect of them. So it's like parts work. It's like, it's more like voice dialogue work, actually, which was popular in the 80s, where you'd change chairs to talk to another part of yourself. So we're kind of really separating it out so we can dialogue with an aspect of our higher self. Yeah. And that's profound. That's where everything starts to come together. And we do ask a series of questions, just 5 questions, which help us understand how that character is protecting us, what they're making us do or not do, just like a spirit attachment, which is a whole other field, and earthbound spirit in our field making us do and not do particular things. But this is a part of us. So we get information about how it's affecting us today. And then we're essentially moving into some forgiveness work. Essentially, we're supporting that energy to go into the light. They don't always want to go. They're like, what? I don't know. I want to be with you. So that can take some facilitation. And it's not until they've moved into the light that the healing is complete. That's the most important part of a past life regression. There's no healing done until that energy is lifted and gone home. Some aha moments might happen. Some spontaneous healings might happen, but it's not because you've visited that life. It's because of other therapeutic work that you've been doing, or the contract within yourself that it's time for that to lift. But generally, we want to be sending that energy into the light to know that that past life is healed. And then we need to go on and integrate what we've learned into our life now.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's all so amazing, all this work you do. And just, yeah, it's incredible how you're helping people, and probably just also so fun to explore all of this and just to see people really heal. Especially, that's what always was so fascinating about QHHT to me, is people are healing things that they couldn't heal here, right? Through doctors or alternative therapies or anything, because it ties so far back into all these other lives. So it's just such cool work.
Exactly. Look, the healings are profound. The transformations are profound. It's such deep work. It really is. Well, you're time traveling, literally. You're literally going into other realms to do this work. So it's very deep and very transformational, and it will become more and more important as people become aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, when you say it, you're saying it's deep work, and I'm here thinking like it's as deep as you can go, right? It's like into your soul. So it's
really deep. And that's where, and sometimes, actually, you know what comes to mind about this is a question you haven't asked, but it's a common question in here about what happens in our childhood and what happens in past life and where to do the work. So sometimes we'll go to a past life and we'll do this beautiful healing, this profound transformational healing, yet we still need to revisit the trauma in childhood that you've brought in from before to heal it in this lifetime as well. So sometimes we need to do both.
Interesting.
We can't kind of bypass the trauma that happened in childhood that is there, that you've wanted because of what's happened before. Sometimes we have to do both.
That's interesting that you say that it was brought into childhood from what happened before. So it's still stemmed, the roots are still in that past life, but you've brought it into this life, and now we need to like go after that weed to stay with this plant metaphor.
Exactly. So, why are you being sexually abused as a child? And that's so not fair and all of that. But none of that's actually true when you're going, coming into a higher perspective on this. Yes, to an earth person that is traumatic, and yes, you will have a lot of, there'll be PTSD and all sorts of things that you need to manage, because you needed to come in to have that experience in order to level up in the ways that you needed. So we've got to be careful about spiritual bypassing here, because I do see a lot of that in these kind of fields where you've got to be spiritual enough to understand that. But it's a process. You've still got to process the anger, the shock, the terror. You've got to process all of that before you can come to this more evolved place. And sometimes we're doing both at once. It's like, I know all of this. I'm in this field. Why am I feeling so much pain? It's because you have an ego and you've still got to process that.
Yeah.
Whilst knowing that there's a play unfolding.
Yeah. I think that's so important, and I'm trying to keep an eye on time here, so we need to wrap up. But I think that's really important, because it is easy once you've done all this spiritual work, well, either A, to be like, why are people struggling so hard, or B, if you struggle again, and because we all still go through challenges and adversities, to not beat yourself up about it, right? Because you have this earth guide only, right? This ego.
Yeah.
And you are a human having a human experience. But on the other hand, it's almost like I kind of almost think of like each lifetime as like a one piece of like a film. And if you put them all in sequential order, it's like, oh, it makes sense why that happened. Like,
Oh, I
oh,
love that. I
it's a
can
big,
see that. That's really cool. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like a piece of a bigger story. But then, of course, there is no such thing as time, and all past lives are happening simultaneously, right? And then we just
Oh,
really
and
don't
you
know.
can't bring that up just when we're about to finish, because yeah,
I
you're
know.
right. In fact, that's a good point to bring up. Yeah, we can't go into that now.
I would love for you to come back on the show though, because I feel like there's so much more we could talk about, and I want to respect your time. So thank you so much. This has been one of my favorite conversations that I've had on the show. And please tell people how they can find you, work with you. What are your offerings?
Yeah, sure. So lightschool.nz is my website, and that's where you'll see what I'm up to and what I'm teaching. My focus is mainly on teaching. And yes, you can join classes about past life regression and spirit releasement therapy and all sorts of interesting stuff from wherever you are. We can get you started in current time, and then you can join live classes to complete certification anytime. I do have limited space for one-on-one sessions. It's not so much my focus anymore, but I am available with some notice to be able to do that. So lightschool.nz. On Facebook, it's Dawn Grace Kelly, spiritual teacher maybe, or Dawn Grace Kelly on my public page as well. I've got two there. Instagram, Dawn Grace Kelly. Is that all? That's all.
And I'll put all of those in the show notes for listeners. So no
Yeah.
need to try to write things down if you're not able to right now. It's all going to be there. Thank you so much. Like I said, I'm going to send you an email after this and ask when we can reschedule for our next one. But yeah, thank you so much. And for listeners, please like, share, subscribe. Let's help elevate the consciousness of humanity. Check out the show notes for all of my links as well. And I'll see you next time. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Oh, thank you so much, Kris. It's been a real joy talking to you, with just being so much on the same page. It makes it easy for me to be able to share more. Yeah, I look forward to connecting again. And thanks for listening. And I hope those of you who have been listening have some kind of sparks going off that can take you further. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Happy day, Kris.